Welcome to Cooking with Fiona, Season 2, Episode 6. Today we are going to be making stuffed pasta shells, giant ones by the way, with meat sauce. The recipe calls for 20 jumbo shells, a pound of chuck beef, ground chuck, 1.5 cups of mozzarella cheese that is shredded, 3.5 cups of marinara sauce, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. I made my own, by the way. It was quite easy. I'll give you the recipe. And salt to taste and ground black pepper. So the directions are, to heat your oven, which is being preheated at 350. And I filled a large pot of water, so I'm getting that rolling so I can boil the big pasta shells. So in the meantime, I'm going to start cooking this ground beef. It's a pound. And so you brown this. It's pink right now, so you brown it till it's brown. It's pink out. And this is, again, a very easy recipe. And it's a delicious one as well. It certainly looks delicious. So that's cooking. The oven is warming up to 350 and the water is rolling. It has to be rolling. So when you're going to be filling this sauce, this pasta sauce, meat sauce I should say, and fill the large shells, stuff the large shells. So after they've cooked and they're al dente, which is slightly undercooked, then you put them actually in ice cold water to seal them so they don't cook any further. That's another trick. So I told you in the beginning that I had to make my own Italian seasoning. So I Googled a recipe for Italian seasoning and I had all of the ingredients, so I made my own, which you will see. Yeah. So it's a fun recipe. You can have this for a nice dinner party. You can have it for a nice luncheon. You can have it for breakfast if you want. Okay, so this is cooking away. And I've chopped a very large onion. So I'm going to cook that onion once this is all browned in here until the onion is translucent and cooked through. And then I add half a cup of mozzarella and half a cup of marinara sauce as well. So I'm making the stuffing is what I'm doing. There you go. That's pretty brown. So then we put chopped onion, one large chopped onion in there. Finely chopped, pretty finely chopped. And you cook away. And that has to be clear, translucent, as they say in the recipe. I try to follow recipes best I can, but most of the time I ad-lib. While that's cooking, I'm going to put a teaspoon of my homemade Italian seasoning. And I'm going to put some salt and pepper, because that will season that up. And then some pepper here. You know, just add whatever you normally would add. And then I'm going to add to that, once it cooks, I'd like to cook the onion down a little more, actually. Then I'm going to add, it actually calls for 3.5 cups. So we divide the 3.5 cups into 2 different portions. So a half a cup will go into the meat sauce, stuffing of marinara, and a half a cup of the 1.5 cups of mozzarella. So let's get that cooking away. There we go. This is all measured out by yours truly, me. And then we add the half a cup of shredded mozzarella. And just stir all that up. Try this recipe, it's really good actually. And it's nice and easy. Sometimes when I read these recipes and I start off and I think, gosh, that looks difficult. But actually, it's very easy. You see, it's all gelling together here. Okay. So if you like this recipe or need a calendar, call me, 534-9932, or text me on that number. Love to hear from you, and certainly love to share with you my calendar, which is some delicious recipes. So while this is cooking, and we're going to turn it right down and cook away, while this is cooking, I'm just going to check on the boiling water, which is rolling, and I'm going to put 20 large shells, pasta shells, in there. So while that's cooking, I would like to introduce you to my surprise guest this morning. He's a delightful gentleman. His name is Lauren Wilson. And come over, Lauren, please. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Fiona.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on
Thank you.
Cooking with Fiona.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
Looks like a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. So Lauren is a director of Cox Hallett Wilkinson. He's the head of private client department. He has his BA in science at the University of Buckingham in England. Fantastic. He's a former police officer. We like that. He specializes in commercial real estate and residential property, estate planning, wills, and trust. And he's a really nice person. He's been a member of the Bar Association since year 2000.
2000.
That's when I first met you. So welcome. It's so nice of you to come. And I'm going to share this whole cooking experience with you. But Lauren, here I am. I sell houses and I introduce the buyer or the seller to you. And we've sold the house. Let's say we have a cash offer and the financing is approved. So we draw it up in draft and then we send it over to you.
Okay, so thanks a lot, Fiona, for that. So when Fiona gives me a draft sale and purchase agreement, the real estate agent will give a draft sale and purchase agreement to the vendor's attorney and the purchaser's attorney. At that point, we will negotiate terms of the contract. It's normally whether it's subject to financing, subject to a boundary survey, subject maybe to a structural survey. Once the terms of the contract are agreed, we send it back to Fiona. She will what's called engross the contract. That means print it on pretty paper, for lack of a better word. And she'll send it to the purchaser's attorney and to the vendor's attorney. We'll sit the clients down, they'll sign. At that point, the purchaser will pay the 10% deposit to Fiona, to the real estate agency. The vendor will sign. We'll send those copies to the real estate agency. The contract will then be dated, stamped, and the deposit will be paid. At that point, we are what's called in contract. Now we have a binding contract. One of the first things that I'll do if I'm acting for a purchaser is what we call a Section 62 planning search. So we'll send a letter to the Department of Planning, right, asking them to look at the property to see if there's been any unauthorized development. What would create unauthorized development? Sometimes people build a swimming pool without planning permission.
That's right, or put a dog shelter on someone else's property or that's not theirs and think that it's their property. I've had that one.
Well, that happens all the time. Sometimes people will build an extra room. You know what we're like. It's my land, I'll do what I want. So when you're acting for the purchaser, you have to ensure that the vendor hasn't done anything that's unauthorized or unlawful. So that search we send to the Department of Planning. By statute, they have 28 days in which to respond to us. And they'll come back and say whether there's any violations or if there's no violations.
Right.
If the Department of Planning does not respond in 28 days, sorry, Fiona,
that's okay,
it's deemed that the property has no planning violations.
Right.
And
that's referred to as a planning search.
That's a planning search, Section 62 planning search. Mm-hmm. And so once we get that back and it's clear, so we're happy with the with the house that there's no planning violations. The next thing that I will do if I'm acting for a purchaser is request the title deeds. So if the vendor is selling a house that doesn't have a mortgage, I'll
Right.
ask their lawyer, can you bring the title deeds into the office?
Right.
If the vendor has a mortgage, we'll request the title deeds from their bank. So what are we doing when we get the title deeds? We're checking to see that the vendor actually owns the house and has the ability to sell it. So you can't sell something that you don't own. The vendor has to prove by law 20 years good title to the property. So we open the deed packet and there's all these little title deeds. And so we go back 20 years to make sure that the property was properly transferred from A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E. That the deeds were properly executed, that they were properly stamped. So what we're looking for is what we call defects in title.
Right.
Right.
Do you look for liens as well?
We certainly do look for
You
liens.
have to look for liens, that's
So the vendor,
right. Debts against the property.
we certainly do that. So in conjunction with checking the title deeds, we search the judgment book and the mortgage book to make sure that there are no judgments against the vendor.
Right.
The reason we check that is for what we call priorities. If there's a judgment that registered against the vendor, the person who he owes the money to has first rights to his house. So we have to pay him whatever that debt is, so that the purchaser, who I'm acting for, can have first right to the house.
Right, and doesn't absorb any liens at all.
Right, so
That's
we're trying to
unacceptable.
clear that lien. The other lien that we'll look for is if the vendor has a mortgage on the house. So we'll check what we call the book of mortgages to see if there's a mortgage. If there is, we'll contact the vendor's lender to find out how much he owes on the mortgage,
Right.
and we will redeem his mortgage out of the proceeds of sale.
Right.
So if we go on, so once we check the title deeds and they're fine, we've checked the judgment register, there's no judgments, we've checked the mortgage book and there's enough from the proceeds of sale to clear off the mortgage. So the next thing we'll do is we'll prepare for completion.
Right.
All right, so I, as the purchaser's attorney, will draft a conveyance, conveying the property from the vendor to the purchaser.
Right.
If there's a mortgage on the property, we draft what's called a deed of reconveyance, which reconveys the mortgage from the vendor's lender to the vendor.
Right.
So from the vendor's lender to the vendor, reconveyance, a conveyance from the vendor to the purchaser, so that the purchaser owns the property. And then if the purchaser is getting mortgage financing, we do another deed called a mortgage, where we mortgage the property to the purchaser's lender. And then we do a completion statement to say how much the property, you're paying for the property, add legal fees and stamp duties, do various adjustments, and we present the completion statement to the purchaser and say, okay, you're getting X amount from the bank to buy the property. This is the balance that's due from you. So we get the money from the purchaser, we get the money from the bank, we get the conveyance drafted and signed by the purchaser and the vendor. We draft a mortgage deed, we send the mortgage deed to the purchaser's lender so that they can give us the money. And so when we get all the monies in, we dial up the vendor's attorney and say, hey,
I
we've
got the money, honey.
I've got the money, honey. and he says, okay, well, I've got the conveyance and the keys. So we trot on over there, we hand over the money, they hand over the conveyance and the keys, and then we are complete.
Closed
Yes,
and
we're closed.
completed.
Yeah.
So, hey, listen, if you have any questions, don't call me up, call Lauren up because he knows all the answers. It's so detailed, I can't even begin to tell you. So the pasta shells have been cooked al dente and they are now sitting in ice cold water, and that's good because then I can retain the shells of the pasta shells, and then Lauren and I can stuff the shells with that mixture right there. So I got a spoon for you and I got a spoon for me.
Fantastic, looking forward to it.
Yes, man, it's delicious. Okay, so here we go. First thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cover the bed of the casserole dish with the marinara sauce, the rest of the marinara sauce. So those pasta shells are gonna be sitting in this bed of sauce. So I'll spread that around there. And, sorry, I keep itching my nose.
Fiona, I must say, this smells absolutely delicious.
Oh, you are so sweet.
It really does.
It does. Now these are all cooked. Thank you, Lauren. You know, these are the chilled pasta shells, And I'm just gonna rinse them through a colander and just make sure there's no water. Let it drain out. Voila. Okay. So, let's go. So I'm gonna do one, and then you'll see what I'm doing. I'll give you a spoon there. Oven's hot. I'm gonna put these pasta shells, but before I put these pasta shells in, I'm gonna sprinkle them with mozzarella, shredded mozzarella. Isn't this looking good?
It looks absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
Portofinos, eat your heart out.
That's right. You tell them.
No offense, Simone. We're still good.
There you go. So let me slip in front of you, and I'm gonna just get this 20 minutes cooking. And really, then I dress it with parsley and basil, freshly picked from our garden. My husband has planted that, which is very sweet of him indeed, and I appreciate it. Voila, it's all cooked. And nicely decorated with the parsley and the basil grown by my husband in his garden. And it's a really yummy recipe, and I'd love for you to try it. Call me, 534-9932. And I'd like to thank Lauren Wilson again for joining me on Cooking with Fiona. And you did, oh my gracious me, you did a fantastic job. I hope that everybody really enjoyed what you had to say, because there's a lot of intricacies that go on behind the scenes, and thank you.
Well, thank you for having me on, Fiona. I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you have any questions about what I said today, you can email me at alwilson@chw.com or call on 295-4630. Cox Salad Wilkinson, happy to take any of your calls and queries.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Fiona.
Thank you. You're a sweet man, and I so appreciate it. I really do. Thank you. Bye for now, and I'll see you soon.
Please call Fiona Hatfield on 534-9932 or email at fhatfield@brcl.bn.